The lecture hall was massive, with rows of seats rising up toward the ceiling like steps on a mountain. Lyra sat in the middle section, her fingers moving across the holographic screen floating in front of her desk. Around her, hundreds of other students did the same thing, taking notes while Professor Velmore spoke about ancient civilizations. Lyra had always loved this class. History of the galaxy was fascinating, full of stories about species that rose to greatness and then fell into darkness. Some destroyed themselves through war, others simply faded away when their sons died. Each story taught the students of the Talvine Empire something important about survival. Today's lesson was about humans. Professor Velmore stood at the front of the hall, his long blue fingers gesturing at the massive display behind him. Images of a small blue planet appeared, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. "Earth," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "The homeworld of a species called humans. They existed in a star system named Sol, far from our own territory." Lyra watched as more images appeared. Humans looked strange to her eyes. They had no scales, no extra arms, no natural armor. Just soft skin and two eyes and mouths that seemed too small. They wore clothing to protect their weak bodies, yet something about them interested her. "The humans are extinct now," Professor Velmore continued. "They died out 200 years ago. When our exploration ships reached their world, they found only ruins. The humans had destroyed themselves through endless wars and pollution. They were not wise enough to survive." A student in the front row raised her hand. "Professor, why do we study them if they failed?" "An excellent question," Velmore said, nodding. "We study the humans as a warning. They show us what happens when a species cannot control their violent nature. They had so much potential, but they wasted it. Their technology was primitive. Their social structures were chaotic. They could not unite as one people, and so they fell." Lyra frowned at her screen. Something felt wrong about this story. She had read the official records last night while preparing for class. The report said humans had colonies in more than 40 star systems. They had ships that could travel faster than light. They had built cities in space and on worlds with no atmosphere. How could a primitive species do all that? Her best friend Kira sat next to her. She leaned close and whispered, "Why do you look confused?" "Something doesn't make sense," Lyra whispered back. "If humans were so primitive, how did they spread to 40 systems?" Kira shrugged. "Maybe they got lucky?" But luck didn't build space stations. Luck didn't create faster-than-light engines. Lyra raised her hand. Professor Velmore noticed and nodded at her. "Yes, Lyra?" "Professor, I have a question about the human colonies," she said, trying to keep her voice respectful. "The records say they had settlements in 43 star systems. That seems like a lot for a primitive species. How did they manage that if their technology was so limited?" The professor's expression hardened slightly. "The records are clear, Lyra. The humans had some basic space travel capability, but they lacked the wisdom to use it properly. They spread too fast, too far, without proper planning. This overextension contributed to their collapse." "But Professor," Lyra continued, unable to stop herself now, "doesn't spreading to 43 systems show advanced capability? Our own empire took 1,000 years to—" "Lyra," Velmore interrupted, his voice sharp. "The official historical records are maintained by the Imperial Archives. They are reviewed by the greatest scholars in the Empire. Are you suggesting that these scholars are wrong?" The entire lecture hall went quiet. Students turned to look at Lyra. Her face felt hot. She knew she had pushed too far. Questioning the official records was not encouraged in the academy. "No, Professor," she said quietly. "I was just trying to understand." "Then understand this," Velmore said. "The humans were a cautionary tale. They had some technology, yes, but technology without wisdom is meaningless. They destroyed themselves and we found only empty worlds. That is the truth. That is what the records show. Do you understand?" "Yes, Professor." But she didn't. Not really. As Velmore turned back to his lecture, Lyra stared at her screen. Something about this story felt incomplete. It felt like pieces were missing. She opened her mouth to ask another question, to push just a little more, to understand why the official story had so many gaps in it. The words started to form on her lips. "Professor, what about—" She froze. Every holographic screen in the lecture hall flickered. The lights dimmed for just a second. Then every display in the room changed. The image of Earth vanished, replaced by a wall of text in a language Lyra had never seen before. Alarms began to sound in the distance, soft at first, then louder. Professor Velmore stopped speaking. He stared at the main display behind him, his mouth open in shock. Students began to murmur, then talk louder, then shout questions. What was happening? Was this a drill? Was it a computer error? Lyra's personal screen flickered again. New text appeared, this time in Talveen language. Her eyes widened as she read it. "Attention citizens of Virath. This is the human vessel Resilience. We are in orbit above your world. We bring a message for your people." Kira grabbed Lyra's arm. "That's impossible. Humans are extinct." But even as she said it, the main display changed again. The view shifted to show space above their planet, and there, hanging against the stars like a knife made of metal and light, was a ship. It was huge, bigger than any Talveen vessel Lyra had ever seen in pictures. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with lights running along its length. It had a sharp, aggressive design that looked nothing like the smooth curves of Talveen ships. Strange. Symbols marked its side, and underneath them, in letters that Lyra could somehow read, was a name: Resilience. The lecture hall erupted in chaos. Students shouted, some stood up. Others tried to access their communication devices, but nothing worked. The human ship had taken control of their networks. Professor Velmore stood frozen at the front of the room, his face pale. He stared at the ship on the display, and Lyra saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. "They're supposed to be dead," someone shouted behind Lyra. "How is this possible?" Another voice cried. Lyra couldn't move. She sat in her chair, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She had been asking questions about humans just moments ago. She had wondered why their story seemed incomplete. And now, a human ship hung in the sky above her world, and everything she had been taught was suddenly in doubt. The alarms grew louder. Emergency announcements began to play throughout the academy. But Lyra barely heard them. She couldn't look away from that ship. From that impossible ship that carried a species that was supposed to be extinct. And in the silence of her own shock, one thought echoed through her mind. Professor Velmore had been wrong. The humans hadn't died out at all. They had been somewhere else, somewhere out in the dark between stars. And now they were here. The academy's emergency alarms echoed through the hallways as Lyra ran back to her dormitory. Students flooded the corridors, all talking at once, some crying, others shouting into their communication devices that still wouldn't work. The human ship had locked down every network on the planet. Nothing was getting in or out except whatever the humans wanted to share. Kira ran beside her, breathing hard. "What's happening? This can't be real." "I don't know," Lyra said, pushing through the crowd, "but I need to see this. I need to understand." They reached Lyra's room and rushed inside. The small space felt safe compared to the chaos outside. Lyra activated the wall screen, and immediately the human ship appeared. It hung there in orbit, dark and silent and impossible. Kira sat on the bed, her hands shaking. "They said humans were extinct," Kira whispered. "They said it in every class, every history book, every—" The screen flickered. The image of the ship vanished, replaced by a man's face. He was human. There was no doubt about that. Lyra had seen pictures of humans in her textbooks, but this was different. This was real. He looked young, maybe 30 or 35 in human years. His skin was tan, his hair black and cut short. His eyes were dark and serious. He wore a uniform that was clean and professional, with symbols on his collar that probably meant he was important. When he spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm for someone who had just appeared above a planet that believed his entire species was dead. "People of Verath," he said. "My name is Minho. I am the captain of the human vessel Resilience. I know you are confused. I know you are frightened. I understand that. For 200 years you have been told that my people are extinct. You have been told that we destroyed ourselves through war and stupidity. You have been told that when your empire reached Earth, you found only ruins and empty cities. He paused, and something changed in his eyes. Something hard. You were lied to. Kira gasped. Lyra felt her stomach twist. Captain Minho continued. 200 years ago, the Talavine Empire did reach Earth. But Earth was not empty. It was full of life, full of billions of humans living in cities, working, raising families, reaching for the stars. Your empire did not find ruins. Your empire created them. The screen changed. Captain Minho's face disappeared, replaced by video footage. Lyra recognized the style. It was old recording technology, the kind used 200 years ago. The image showed Earth from space, that beautiful blue planet from her textbook. But this Earth was different. It was surrounded by ships, hundreds of them, thousands, Talavine ships. The footage continued. Lyra watched in horror as the Talavine fleet opened fire on Earth. Bright beams of energy lanced down toward the planet's surface. Explosions bloomed across the continents. Human ships, smaller and fewer in number, rose to defend their world. They fought desperately, and Lyra could see they were skilled. But there were too many Talavine ships. Your empire came to Earth not as explorers, but as conquerors, Captain Minho's voice said over the footage. The Talavine wanted our resources, our worlds, our territory. We refused to surrender, so your leaders decided to take what they wanted by force. More footage played. Images of cities burning, human colony worlds under attack, space stations exploding in silent bursts of light. The Talavine fleet moved from system to system, destroying everything in their path. Lyra felt sick. We fought back, Minho said. We fought with everything we had. But your empire was larger, older, more powerful. We were losing. Our military leaders knew that if we stayed, we would be completely destroyed. So our Admiral Taiyang made a choice. The footage showed massive human ships different from the warships. These were colony vessels, huge and slow. Thousands of them gathered in space around Earth. Admiral Taiyang ordered an evacuation. Every ship that could fly, every vessel that could carry people. We loaded millions of humans onto those ships. We took our children, our elderly, our knowledge, our history, and we ran. We fled into deep space beyond the edge of known territory, into the dark. Your empire believed we would die out there. They believed the void would finish what they started. Captain Minho's face returned to the screen. His expression was hard as stone. They were wrong. The image changed again, showing star charts, routes through unknown space, worlds that Lyra had never seen in any Talavine map. We survived, Minho said. It was not easy. We lost many people in those first years. Starvation, disease, accidents. The cold of space is not kind, but we survived. We built new homes on harsh worlds. We adapted our technology. We learned from our mistakes, and we grew stronger. The footage showed human colonies, cities built into mountains, stations orbiting strange suns, ships that looked more advanced than anything Lyra had seen in Talavine space. For 200 years we have been out here, Minho said. Building, learning, watching. We placed sensor stations throughout your territory. We studied you from the shadows. We learned that after you destroyed our worlds, your empire rewrote history. You erased the war. You erased your crimes. You told your children that humans destroyed themselves, that we were primitive and violent and foolish. His voice grew harder. You turned your genocide into a lesson about the dangers of aggression. You used our deaths to make yourselves feel wise. Lyra's hands covered her mouth. Tears ran down her face. Kira was crying too, shaking her head in denial. But the evidence was there on the screen, clear and undeniable. We could have come back sooner, Captain Minho said. We could have returned with weapons, with anger, with revenge. But we chose to wait. We chose to become better than you were. And now we are here. One ship. That is all I brought. One ship above your home world. The image changed, showing dozens of points of light appearing throughout Talavine space. Space stations, asteroid bases, communication networks, all with human signatures. These are our sensor stations, Minho explained. We have been watching you for decades. We know your fleet positions, your defenses, your capabilities. One ship is enough because if we wanted war, it would already be over. The points of light disappeared. Captain Minho's face filled the screen again. But we do not want war. We want truth. We want your people to know what really happened 200 years ago. We want the lies to stop. We want recognition of the crimes your empire committed, and we want to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." He leaned forward slightly. "I know this is difficult to hear. I know many of you are frightened. But understand this, we came for justice, not revenge. We came to speak, not to kill. The choice now is yours. Your leaders can acknowledge the truth and work with us toward peace, or they can continue to deny what happened." His expression softened just slightly. "We hope you choose truth. We hope you choose peace. We are tired of hiding, tired of watching from the dark. We want to live in the light again. We want our children to know that the galaxy can be better than it was. But that can only happen if you face what your empire did to us." The screen went dark. Then normal broadcasts returned, but they were chaos. News channels showed panicking crowds. Government officials shouting at each other. Military commanders arguing about what to do. The entire planet had seen the message. Millions of people, all learning at the same moment that their history was a lie. Lyra sat on the floor, her back against the wall. Her entire education felt like smoke. Everything she had learned, everything she believed about her empire's greatness and wisdom was built on a foundation of lies and blood. "They killed billions," Kira whispered. "Our empire killed billions of humans." Lyra nodded, unable to speak. Outside, sirens wailed. People shouted. The world she knew was ending. But somewhere in her shock, something else grew. A tiny seed of something that might have been hope. The humans had come back. They were stronger than ever. They could have destroyed Vareth with ease, but they chose to talk instead. They chose truth over revenge. Maybe, Lyra thought, there was something her people could learn from that. 3 days after the human message, the government of Vareth was still in chaos. Lyra watched the news broadcast from her dormitory room, seeing officials argue on every channel. Some wanted to attack the human ship. Others wanted to negotiate. Many simply wanted to deny that any of it was real, but denial was becoming impossible. The human ship remained in orbit, silent and patient. Every attempt to scan it failed. Every attempt to hack its systems bounced back. The resilience was completely invisible to Talavine's sensors unless it wanted to be seen. That fact scared the military commanders more than anything else. Kira brought food to Lyra's room that evening. Neither of them had been eating much. The academy had canceled all classes. Most students had gone home to be with their families. But Lyra stayed. She felt like something important was about to happen, and she wanted to be here when it did. "The High Chancellor is going to meet with them," Kira said, setting down a tray of fruit and bread. "They announced it an hour ago. Tomorrow morning. In the Capitol building." Lyra sat up straight. "They agreed to negotiate." "They don't have much choice," Kira said quietly. "The military tried to scan the human ship yesterday with our best sensors. Nothing. It's like the ship doesn't exist until it wants to." General Corthan said it was the most advanced stealth technology he had ever seen. The name made Lyra pause. "Corthan? The old general?" "Yes, he's almost 200 years old now. They brought him out of retirement because he's one of the only military leaders still alive who remembers the war with Earth. Apparently, he commanded one of the fleets that attacked the human colonies." Lyra felt cold. One of the people responsible for the genocide was still alive, still honored, still part of their government. How many others like him existed? How many leaders knew the truth and said nothing? The next morning, Lyra and Kira joined thousands of other Talvine citizens outside the Capitol building. Security forces tried to keep the crowd back, but everyone wanted to see the humans, to see if they were real, to see what would happen next. A shuttle descended from the sky just after dawn. It was human in design, sleek and dark gray like the Resilience. It landed in the plaza in front of the Capitol, and the crowd went silent. Lyra's heart pounded as a door opened in the shuttle's side. Captain Minho stepped out first. He looked exactly like he had in the broadcast, calm and professional in his dark uniform. Behind him came 2 other humans. One was a woman who wore the same style of uniform, her hair pulled back in a tight knot. The other was a man in different clothes, something more formal with symbols that looked like they represented scholarship rather than military service. Lyra stared at them. They walked across the plaza like they had every right to be there, like they were not afraid of the thousands of Talvine watching them, like they knew something everyone else didn't. The humans entered the Capitol building. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The crowd waited. Lyra's legs hurt from standing, but she couldn't leave. Finally, screens activated around the plaza. The government was broadcasting the meeting. The negotiation chamber was large and formal. High Chancellor Morvex sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by advisors and military commanders. Lyra recognized General Corthan, his scales gray with age, his eyes tired. The humans sat across from them. Captain Minho in the center, the woman to his right, the man to his left. "I am Commander Yuna," the woman said, her voice clear and strong. "I serve as diplomatic officer for the human fleet. This is Specialist Do-hyun, our historian and cultural expert. We are here to discuss terms for peace and recognition." High Chancellor Morvex looked uncomfortable. He was not used to being in a position of weakness. "The Talvine Empire is prepared to discuss certain historical discrepancies," he said carefully. "However, we must verify the claims you have made. We need proof that we are telling the truth," Commander Yuna interrupted. "Of course." She placed a small device on the table. Holographic displays appeared above it, showing documents. Battle logs, communications records, video footage. All from 200 years ago, all from Talvine military sources. Do-hyun spoke next. His voice was softer than the others, but it carried weight. "We have spent 200 years collecting evidence. Every battle report, every command decision, every communication between your fleets. We recovered data from destroyed Talvine ships. We interviewed survivors. We built a complete historical record." The holograms shifted, showing more and more evidence. Lyra watched from the plaza screen as the Talvine officials grew paler. There was no way to deny it. The proof was absolute. General Corthan suddenly stood. His old body shook. "It is true," he said, his voice breaking. "All of it. I was there. I commanded the Third Fleet. We were ordered to take the human colonies by force. They resisted. We destroyed their cities. We killed millions." The chamber went silent. Morvex stared at Corthan in shock. The old general continued, tears running down his scaled face. "I have lived with this guilt for 200 years. I told myself we were following orders, that we were expanding the empire. But I knew. I always knew it was wrong. We murdered them. We destroyed their worlds, and then we erased the evidence and called them primitive. We turned genocide into a history lesson." Corthan looked at Captain Minho. "I am sorry. It means nothing, I know. But I am sorry." Minho's expression didn't change. "Your apology is noted, General. But apologies do not bring back the billions who died. They do not erase the pain. They are a start, nothing more." Commander Yuna spoke again. "Humanity spent 200 years rebuilding. We now control 87 star systems. Our technology has advanced beyond anything the Talvine Empire possesses. We have ships that could reduce your worlds to ash, but we choose not to use them." She activated another display. The screens showed star maps of Talvine space. Dozens of red dots appeared throughout their territory. "These are our observation posts," Yuna explained. "We have been watching you for 40 years. We know every ship position, every defense station, every military base. We could have struck at any time. We chose to wait, to watch, to see if your empire would change on its own." "It didn't," Do-hyun said quietly. "You continued to tell lies. You continued to teach your children false history. So we decided it was time to reveal the truth." Morvex found his voice again. "What do you want from us?" "3 things," Captain Minho said, holding up fingers. "First, public acknowledgement of what happened. The truth must be taught in your schools. The genocide must be recognized. Second, reparations. Resources and aid to help rebuild what was destroyed. Third, a treaty. Non-aggression, trade, cooperation, a guarantee that this never happens again." "And if we refuse?" one of the Talvine commanders asked. Minho's expression hardened. "Then we leave. We return to the dark, and we ensure that your empire never expands beyond your current borders. We will watch you forever. You will never reach another star without our permission. You will be quarantined until you learn to act with honor." The threat hung in the air. Lyra realized what he meant. The humans didn't need to attack. They just needed to contain the Talvine Empire, keep them isolated, trapped in their own territory. It would be a prison made of shame and lost opportunity. "You have 1 week to decide," Commander Yuna said. "We will wait in orbit. When you are ready to choose truth and peace, we will talk again." The humans stood and walked out of the chamber. The broadcast ended. In the plaza, the crowd erupted in noise. Some people shouted in anger. Others cried. Many simply stood in shock. Lyra felt Kira grab her arm. "They're coming out!" The humans emerged from the Capitol building. As they walked toward their shuttle, Lyra found herself pushing through the crowd. She didn't know why. She just needed to be closer. Needed to see them up close. She broke through the security line just as Specialist Do-Yun passed by. He looked at her and their eyes met. He was older than she expected, with lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. But his expression was kind. "Your students?" he asked, glancing at her academy uniform. Lyra nodded, unable to speak. Do-Hyun smiled sadly. "Then you deserve the truth most of all. Learn it, teach it, make sure it never happens again." Then he was gone, boarding the shuttle with the others. The craft lifted into the sky and disappeared. Lyra stood in the plaza, her heart pounding, while around her the world she knew continued to collapse. But maybe, she thought, something better could be built from the ruins. 3 months passed, and Vareth was not the same world anymore. The Talvine Empire had agreed to the human terms. High Chancellor Morvex had made a public announcement, confessing the truth about the war 200 years ago. The broadcast showed him reading from prepared statements, his voice hollow and defeated. Some citizens praised his honesty. Others called for his resignation. The Empire was splitting apart as people struggled with the weight of their history. Lyra had not returned to her classes. The academy had reopened, but Professor Velmore was gone. He had resigned the day after the truth came out, leaving only a short message that said he could not teach history when he had taught lies his entire life. Many other professors left too. The entire education system was being rebuilt from the ground up. Instead of studying, Lyra spent her days organizing. She and hundreds of other students had formed a movement demanding change. They called themselves the Truth Speakers. They held rallies. They created new educational materials based on actual historical evidence. They pressured the government to release classified documents. Slowly, piece by piece, the real story of the Talvine Empire was emerging, and much of it was ugly. The humans had established an embassy in the capital city. It was a simple building, not as grand as other embassy structures, but it had become the most visited location on Vareth. Thousands of Talvine came every day, some to apologize, others to learn, many just to see humans in person. Ambassador Seojin ran the embassy with quiet efficiency. He was younger than Captain Minho, maybe in his late 20s, with a warm smile that made him approachable. He gave speeches about forgiveness and moving forward. He met with government officials and student groups. And somehow, despite everything his people had suffered, he never showed anger. Lyra requested a meeting with him one afternoon. She was nervous as she entered his office, her hands shaking slightly. The room was decorated with both human and Talvine art, a visual representation of the bridge they were trying to build. "Lyra," Seojin said, standing to greet her. "I've heard about your work with the Truth Speakers. You've accomplished a lot in a short time." "Thank you, Ambassador," she said, sitting down across from him. "I wanted to ask you something. Something I don't understand." "Ask. Why didn't you destroy us?" The question burst out of her. "You had the power. You had the right. We killed billions of your people. Why did you show mercy?" Seojin was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Because revenge is easy," he finally said. "Revenge feels good in the moment. It satisfies anger, but it doesn't build anything. It doesn't create a future. It just makes more death, more pain, more reasons for the next generation to hate." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "My grandmother was on one of the evacuation ships. She was only 10 years old when they fled Earth. She told me stories about those years in space. The hunger, the cold, the fear. She told me about watching friends die because there wasn't enough medicine, about eating recycled protein paste for years because real food was too precious." Lyra felt tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry." "She also told me something else," Seojun continued. "She said that in those dark times humanity had a choice. We could let the darkness consume us, turn us into something hard and cruel. Or we could hold on to what made us human. Compassion, hope. The belief that people can be better than their worst moments." He turned back to Lyra. "We chose to hold on. And when we became strong enough to return, we had another choice. Become what the Talvine Empire was 200 years ago. Or become something better. We chose better." "Your people are stronger than mine," Lyra whispered. "No," Seojin said firmly. "We are just people who learned hard lessons. Your people can learn them too. That's why we're here. That's why we're helping you rebuild your education system. Because we believe that given the truth, given the chance, People will choose to be better. A few weeks later, Dr. Minji arrived on Varath with a medical team. She was older than the other humans Lyra had met, maybe 50, with gray in her hair and a calm, professional manner. Her mission was unusual. She had come to help Talveen War veterans who were suffering from guilt and trauma. General Korthan was her first patient. Lyra heard about it from Kira, who had a cousin in the military. The old general had been falling apart since his confession. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. The weight of his crimes was crushing him. Dr. Minji worked with him for weeks. Lyra didn't know what they talked about, but slowly Korthan began to appear in public again. He started giving speeches at schools, telling young Talveen about the reality of war, about how easy it was to follow orders without thinking, about how important it was to question authority when authority was wrong. She's helping him process his guilt, Seojin explained to Lyra during another meeting, not erasing it, not forgiving it, but helping him carry it in a way that lets him do some good before he dies. Lyra's younger sister, Nari, became obsessed with human culture. She read everything she could find about Earth. She learned human languages. She studied human engineering and art and music. When Lyra asked her why, Nari said, "Because they survived the impossible. I want to understand how." But not everyone welcomed the humans. A radical group formed, calling themselves the Talveen Pride Movement. They claimed the humans were lying, that the evidence was fake, that the Empire had done nothing wrong. They held counter-rallies against the truth speakers. They published articles calling humans manipulators and deceivers. One night they attacked the human embassy. Lyra was there when it happened. She had been meeting with Seojin about a new educational program when the alarms went off. Explosions rocked the building. Windows shattered. Talveen Pride members stormed through the entrance armed with weapons and screaming about human lies. Seojin immediately grabbed Lyra and pushed her behind a desk.
"Stay down."
Human security personnel responded instantly, but they didn't use lethal force. Lyra watched in amazement as they deployed stunning weapons, nets, and barriers. They disabled every attacker within minutes without killing a single one. The efficiency was terrifying. These humans could have slaughtered everyone in the building. Instead, they carefully subdued them. When it was over, Lyra stood on shaking legs. "You didn't kill them?" "No," Seojin said calmly, checking her for injuries. "Killing them would accomplish nothing. They're scared, angry, confused. They need education, not execution." Word spread about the embassy attack, and something unexpected happened. Thousands of Talveen citizens came to the embassy the next day. Students, workers, families. They formed a protective ring around the building, holding signs that said, "Not in our name," and "Truth matters," and "We stand with humanity." Lyra stood in that crowd with Kira and Nari. They linked arms with other Talveen who had chosen truth over pride. Captain Minho himself came down from the Resilience to see it. He walked through the crowd, shaking hands, thanking people for their courage. When he reached Lyra, he stopped. "You were in the lecture hall that day, weren't you?" "When we arrived?" "Yes," she said, surprised he knew. "I was asking questions about humans, about why the official story didn't make sense." Minho smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. "You were questioning authority even before we came. That takes courage. Keep questioning. Keep pushing. Your world needs people like you." Later that evening, as the sun set over Varath, Lyra sat on the roof of her dormitory with Kira and Nari. They watched the Resilience orbit overhead, a dark shape against the stars. "Everything is different now," Nari said quietly. "Yes," Lyra agreed, "but maybe different is good. Maybe we needed to be broken down before we could be built up better." Kira squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you kept asking questions that day in class. I'm glad you didn't just accept what we were told." "Me too," Lyra said, and for the first time in months she felt something like hope. Real hope. The kind that came from seeing people choose to be better, even when being better was hard. The humans had come back from extinction. The Talveen could come back from lies. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But it was possible. And that possibility was enough. 1 year after the Resilience appeared in the sky, Varath held a ceremony that would have been unthinkable before. A memorial was being unveiled in the center of the capital city, dedicated to the victims of the war 200 years ago. Thousands of people gathered to witness it. Humans and Talveen stood together in the crowd, a sight that still felt strange to Lyra even after months of cooperation. The memorial was simple but powerful. A wall of black stone engraved with names, billions of names, human names from Earth and the colonies, and beside them a smaller list of Talvine names, soldiers who had died in the war, and more importantly, officials and citizens who had worked to reveal the truth and make peace. Lyra stood near the front of the crowd with Kira and Nari. She wore formal clothes for the occasion. So much had changed in a year. The Truth Speakers movement had grown from a small student group into a major force for reform across the Empire. 3 members of the High Council had resigned. New elections were being held. The entire government structure was being rebuilt based on transparency and accountability. Professor Velmore was there too. He looked older than Lyra remembered, but he stood straight and proud. After months of depression, he had started a new project, writing the true history of the Talvine Empire. He spent his days in archives, digging through old records, interviewing survivors, piecing together the real story. His book would be published next month. Every school in the Empire would use it. General Corathen arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by a young Talvine aide. He was dying. Everyone knew it. The doctor said he had maybe a few weeks left, but he had insisted on coming. He had something to say. The crowd quieted as speakers took the stage. High Chancellor Morvex, one of the few officials who had kept his position by fully cooperating with reforms, spoke first. He talked about accountability and learning from the past. His words were good, but they felt rehearsed, official. Then Captain Minho spoke. He stood at the podium in his uniform, the same uniform he had worn when he first appeared on Talvine broadcasts a year ago. "This memorial is not just for the dead," he said. "It is for the living. It is a reminder that we must never forget what happened, that we must never allow it to happen again. That truth, no matter how painful, is always better than comfortable lies." Ambassador Seojin spoke next, talking about forgiveness and moving forward. Dr. Minji spoke about healing. Commander Yuna discussed the new treaty that had been signed last month, a formal agreement of peace, trade, and mutual defense between humanity and the Talvine Empire. Then it was General Corthen's turn. His aide wheeled him to a specially built ramp at the side of the stage. The crowd watched in silence as the old general struggled to his feet, refusing help, determined to stand on his own for this moment. "I am a war criminal," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I killed millions of humans. I destroyed their homes. I followed orders and I did terrible things. For 200 years I told myself I was a hero, a loyal soldier of the Empire. But I was wrong." He paused, breathing hard. "I cannot undo what I did. I cannot bring back the dead, but I can speak the truth. I can tell every young Talvin who will listen. Obedience is not virtue when your orders are evil. Loyalty is not honor when your cause is unjust. Question everything. Challenge authority when authority is wrong. Do not become what I was." Tears ran down his scaled face. "To the humans watching this, I offer my confession. I am sorry. I know it means nothing. I know it changes nothing. But it is all I have left to give. I am sorry. I am so very sorry." He sat down heavily in his wheelchair. The crowd was silent. Then slowly, from the human section of the audience, someone began to clap. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some humans could never forgive, and that was their right. But enough. Enough to show that acknowledgement mattered. That speaking truth mattered. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Lyra found herself talking to a human scientist named Hyunwoo. He was explaining a new project, a joint research station that would be built between human and Talvine space. Scientists from both species would work together studying dark matter and exotic physics. "We've designed it so that both our technologies can integrate," Hyunwoo explained enthusiastically. "Human computing systems with Talvine sensor arrays. Your people are brilliant at long-range detection, ours are good at data processing. Together we could make discoveries neither species could make alone." Nari peppered him with questions about human engineering. She had been accepted to a human university and would be leaving Verath in 2 months. She was excited and terrified in equal measure. Lyra had received her own acceptance letter last week, a full scholarship to study interspecies relations and history on a human colony world called New Terra. She would be one of the first Talvine students to study in human space. The opportunity was incredible, but it meant leaving behind everything familiar. Kira found her near the end of the reception. Are you really going? Yes, Lyra said. I need to understand them better. Their history, their culture, how they survived. I want to write about it, teach about it, help bridge the gap between our peoples. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. But this is important, Kira. Someone has to be the bridge. Someone has to carry the truth forward. The next morning, Lyra visited Professor Velmore at his home. He lived in a small apartment now, surrounded by books and documents and screens displaying historical records. He smiled when he saw her. Lyra, I heard about your scholarship. Congratulations. Thank you, Professor. I came to say goodbye. And to give you something. She handed him a data chip. It's my notes. Everything I documented over the past year. The rallies. The reforms. The changes. I thought you might want it for your book. Velmore took the chip with trembling hands. This is valuable. Thank you, but I have something for you too. He handed her a data tablet. My research. 20 years of work. The real history of the Telvine Empire. As complete as I could make it. The good parts and the terrible parts. All of it. I want you to have it. Use it in your studies. Share it with the humans. Let them know we're trying to face our past honestly. Lyra hugged him. I will, I promise. Teach them, Velmore said softly. Teach others what I failed to teach you. That truth matters more than pride. That facing our mistakes is how we grow. That being better is always possible. 2 weeks later, Lyra stood in the spaceport with her family. Kira was there too, trying not to cry. Nari was chattering excitedly about her own upcoming journey. Lyra's parents looked proud and worried at the same time. Be safe, her mother said, holding her tight. Learn everything you can, her father added. The transport ship was human-designed, sleek and efficient. Lyra walked up the boarding ramp with her single bag of belongings. Everything else she needed would be provided on New Terra. She found a seat by a window and watched as Vareth fell away below her. The planet looked beautiful from orbit. Blue and green and white wrapped in clouds. It was hard to believe that 1 year ago, a single human ship had appeared above that world and changed everything. Hard to believe that she had been in a lecture hall, asking questions about humans when the alarm started ringing. First time in space? Lyra turned to see Captain Minho sitting across the aisle from her. She was surprised. Captain, I didn't know you would be on this ship. I'm returning to New Terra for reassignment, he said. My work here is done. Ambassador Seojin and the others will continue the diplomatic mission, but the resilience is needed elsewhere. Will you miss Vareth? In some ways, yes. It's been an interesting year, challenging, but good. Your people are changing, really changing. That gives me hope for the galaxy. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel. Stars stretched into lines outside the window. Lyra felt her stomach flip at the sensation. Minho chuckled. You get used to it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lyra asked the question that had been on her mind. That day in the lecture hall when your ship appeared, I had just frozen mid-sentence. I was asking questions about humans, about why our history didn't make sense. Was that just coincidence? Minho smiled. We'd been monitoring Telvine communications for months, waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. We knew there were people like you, people who questioned, people who wanted truth. We knew that if we came, you would be ready to listen. Maybe not everyone, but enough. You were already preparing your world for us. You just didn't know it. I was so scared that day. Fear is normal when your world changes, Minho said. But you didn't let fear stop you. You kept questioning, kept pushing, kept demanding truth even when it was hard. That's courage, Lyra. Real courage. The journey to New Terra would take 3 days. Lyra spent the time reading, sleeping, and talking with other passengers. There were a few other Telvine students going to study in human space. They were all nervous and excited. When New Terra appeared in the window, Lyra caught her breath. It looked like Earth in the old photos. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. But it was larger, with 2 moons instead of 1. Cities sparkled on the night side. Space stations orbited like jewels. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's home, Minho said. One of many homes humanity built in exile. Each one is a reminder that even in our darkest hour, we didn't give up. We survived, we built, we became more than we were. The ship landed at a spaceport larger than anything on Vareth. Lyra walked down the ramp onto human soil for the first time. The air smelled different. The gravity felt slightly lighter. Everything was new and strange and wonderful. A human woman waited at the base of the ramp. She wore academic robes and had a kind smile. "Lyra, I'm Professor Hana. I'll be your advisor at the university. Welcome to New Terra." Lyra looked back at the ship. Captain Minho stood at the top of the ramp, watching. She waved at him. He nodded once, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. Then he was gone, back to his ship and his duties. "Come on," Professor Hana said. "Let me show you your new home." As they walked through the spaceport, Lyra pulled out her tablet and opened a blank document. She began to type. History of the Human-Talavine War, A Student's Perspective, by Lyra of Verath. She had frozen mid-sentence once when a human ship appeared in her world's sky, but she had found her voice again. And now she would use that voice to tell the truth, to build bridges, to help ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to be part of something bigger than herself. The human ship that had appeared above her world had changed everything. But in the end, it wasn't the ship that mattered. It was what came after. The choice to face truth, the choice to be better, the choice to build something new from the ashes of old mistakes. And that choice, Lyra now understood, was the most human thing of all.